Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are going to be looking and reviewing this bike. This is one of Kawasaki's best bikes I've ever ridden. I would consider this bike to be an incredible bargain and a hit. It really is a home run from Kawasaki. Of course, this is a 2015 Kawasaki Versys 650 ABS. Let's get started. It's fuel injected. It has a 6-speed manual transmission. Wheelbase is 55.7 inches. Up front you have a 5.9 inch fork. The rear suspension has got 5.7 inches. It uses both 17-inch tires. It's got dual 300mm rotors up front. It's got a single 250mm rotor in the rear. For this particular one, with the saddlebags and handguards and all of the hardware, it's about 476 pounds. The fuel capacity is 5.5 gallons, and it comes with a bunch of colors, including candy lime, which this is, the green, and the pearl stardust white. The MSRP back in the day was $8,699. You know, I've never really had a want for a Kawasaki Versys. I've seen them. They look like to be very nice bikes, comparable to the V-Strom. And this is the first time I've ridden a Kawasaki Versys. You know, I've owned many bikes, and after riding this, I realized this is probably one of the better bikes out there. It's really nimble. It turns in really quickly. It's got this lightness feel to it that I don't see on a lot of bikes. And it's fun. It doesn't have a powerful motor. The transmission is clunky, but it's probably one of the better all-arounders I've ever seen. For this model year, Kawasaki changed the entire look of the Versys. It's got like this dual headlight. It's much more contemporary. It looks very much like Kawasaki's line with these angular slopes and lines everywhere. This is considered a whole lot more appealing than the one headlight one that looks kind of like the Punisher. I like the Punisher style of bikes, but this is an improvement. It's much more generic in a way because it looks just like every other Kawasaki. The previous Versys looked great. I really like it, and this one is an improvement. Up front, you have a 17-inch tire, so it's 17s on both front and rear. Dual rotors, 300mm. This one comes with ABS. Stopping power is pretty good, but it does dive in a little bit as you're riding. This has got upside down forks, and they work fairly well. I believe this is the stock suspension. It goes around corners almost flawless. This bike, you think about cornering and it just does it. People might not like the color, but I really think that this is the color to get. If you're going to get a Kawasaki, this sort of green just always looks great. Particular example has been crashed. You can see the blinker is actually broken, this plastic, the side plastic, and it's easy enough to repair, but you know, keep that in mind. A lot of people that bought these bikes were beginners, because this makes a really good beginner bike and for experienced riders. I hate to say it that way, but it really is a fun bike. So a lot of these bikes get dropped. This bike has minimal plastic, so it's got like a top fairing, which is where the blinkers mount, and then you have like this kind of like bash plate at the bottom. Engine wise, very simple. Everything is like very easy to reach. You have your sight glass here for checking the oil. This is where you fill it. It's very simple. Now here's something that I do like about these Kawasaki's. They generally have these like low mount exhausts, and it makes a whole lot more sense than having this like thing that kind of swoops back and is extremely heavy. And it's facing this way, so the hole is kind of facing this way. It's kind of a quiet bike at idle. Sounds very much like a Ninja 250, and then up top it starts to sound really good. But I do like the exhaust, especially on Kawasaki's, that they're putting it this way. It's like, why make it so large on bikes? So that's a good feature. Now, this is also something very unique to this bike. You have one single shock in the rear, and it's not mounted in the middle. It's mounted off to the right, and I think it looks great. Seeing this kind of like move up and down, and just aesthetically, I like how it looks. You have a preload adjustment here, very easy to reach, and you can make it harder and softer. The V-Strom also had that, but that knob was much larger. The swing arm is also very unique. It's very large and it's aluminum, comes down, so it kind of swoops up and down. And styling wise, I think it looks great. It's got the adjustment here. It's very standard. You just move these bolts to adjust the chain, push this back to properly tension that chain. And this one's got a 250 millimeter rotor in the rear and the ABS. It stops fine. It doesn't. This bike is not overly powerful, so you don't need super great brakes, but the brakes are adequate. The passenger bags. This is something that the Versys is known for. You know, Versys stands for versatile, and this bike is versatile. This is very well designed. I like this shape instead of the round kind of shape. You just put the key here, twist it, and then you lift up and it comes out like this. I already have some stuff on here. Now, this, you can put this together and that's going to hold whatever items you want in here. And I have some items, and let's close this really quick, and all you do is kind of just push this down and it locks. If you want to remove, this becomes locked, but if you want to pull the bag out, there's this lever here and you push it up and there's a little sticker that's been faded. There we go. A little bit of an effort, but it kind of just slides into these slots. Let me show you. The slots that it goes in, so you kind of push it this way and then slide it forward and it locks in place. The bag out the way, you can see that 17-inch tire. It's a 160/60. It's got quite a few scratches here and there because this bike does have 17,000 miles. It's got a nice hugger also to keep stuff away from the underside of the bike. This bike looks good, but I think it looks much better with the bags. I don't know. Having these color coordinated bags looks so much better than just having it naked. But it does look pretty good naked, especially with that hugger on the rear wheel. Another thing that I don't particularly like about these bags is that they are side mounting, and I wish by putting a little bit of an effort putting this thing in. Yeah, there we go. And now push down on this, remove your key, and it's ready. So the side mounting I don't particularly like because you're always like struggling to put stuff, especially on the left side of the bike when it's leaning on the kickstand. But it would be nice to have top loading bags. They're just so much more usable than these side mounting bags. And this one's got like an accent of the green and it says Kawasaki along with the reflector. This is the rear end of the bike. You have two blinkers. You have the plate light and then the tail light. The tail light is clear. It's not one of the red ones. And this is all kind of faded. So this bike has been stored outside and all the plastic started to fade. I appreciate about naked bikes is the ease of maintenance. Right over here you have the ABS unit. Good luck finding an ABS unit on a ST1300. It's so much more difficult. And you know, I haven't heard about these failing very much, but they seem to be very easy to remove and replace if it does. And the left side, very uninspiring design, I think. It's typical of Kawasaki. They kind of make things a little bit cheaper than Honda. Everything just looks a little bit cheaper. The material that they use, they put like these plastics everywhere, and it doesn't seem like to be high quality. This is replaceable, so this for your heel, it tends to rub out the metal here, so they put like this little piece of plastic. On the other side, it also has it as well. This horn is probably one of the worst horns I've ever heard on a bike. You might want to replace this. This particular bike has got an adjustable windscreen by Windscreen. You untwist this and you can move it down and up. This particular one has got hand guards. You know, this bike is styled more like a big trailer with 17-inch tires. This is not really that usable for this bike, but it looks cool to have, and it does keep the wind away from your hands while riding. But I think it's more of a stylistic choice, and it is quite rashed up, and it's faded. On this left side, you have, of course, your clutch. You have your high beam, turn signals, horn, and then a faded hazard button. And here is a passing button. This is a nice feature that a lot of bikes are coming out with. It's this bar on the top, which you can put like a GPS or your phone for navigation. Gauge cluster on the bike, and gauge, the cluster is like, at a certain point, everybody had the black gauges, and then around 2010, they started putting white gauges on everything, you know, like, so now in a way, these white gauges look rather tacky. But let me go ahead and show you what it looks like. There's a little bit of an animation that happens when you power it on. So the font that they use on a lot of Kawasaki's, whatever this is, Kawasaki needs to replace that with something a little bit better. It looks amateurish, I think, but it's a very small gauge cluster. And a lot of bikes have a lot more LCDs, and this is a 2015. You'd expect a little bit more from it. So only two buttons, one here is the reset. And on this bike, down here you have your fuel gauge, you have the time, and then the odometer, 17.9 thousand miles. Here you have the miles per hour. This is your tach. Then you have some indicators, which is ABS, and then the engine light. And cycling through, you have trip 1, trip B. You have a onboard MPG calculator. You have an average MPG, which is 50. It's pretty decent mileage. You have a range. Once you start moving, it'll calculate that. And that's pretty much it. Then you have a light here, which is a oil light. Before you start it, it always comes on. This is your reset. Then you have a headlight button there. You have turn signals, indicators. So everything's like laid out pretty easily. Left side, you have a 12-volt socket, which you can kind of close like that. Always handy to have something like this. On the other side, there is a socket mount for another one of these, or if you wanted to put a USB charger on the other side. On this right side, you have your throttle, and you have like this thing that kind of just helps throttling and keeping it moving. Then you have your kill switch and your starter, and of course your front brake. This particular Versys has got the Corbin seat. It's kind of like a very low seat. Most, I believe the stock seat is higher, so this one kind of puts you down a little bit more. And it's typical of Corbin. I don't think I've been very happy with Corbin seats previously. It's just they were not comfortable for me. And it helps in short rides, but the first ride I did was like 200 miles on this. Didn't feel great after a while, especially on the highway. Remove the seat. It's kind of hidden here. You just twist it. Yeah, like that. And you bring it up. The seat is pretty heavy. Less battery here. Nice low mounted. You have your fuses. You have your rear brake reservoir. You have a tool pouch. You have another fuse box here and a bunch of relays. And this is the mechanism for opening the seat. Should just drop in. There we go. Got this quick release tank bag. There's a lever on one side. You just kind of pull it out and it comes right out. One thing I don't like is this gas cap. It's one of these screwable things, which I hate. It's like then you have to like figure out where to put it. I guess you could put it here. It's by Vortex, so, but it is nice to have the convenience of not ruining your tank, scratching your tank. The mirrors on this bike are cheap, they're effective, and you really don't need anything more. This bike does not sound good at idle at all. It does have fuel injector, so it starts right up, but I'm not a fan of the sound it makes. Not great. All right, Next thing we're gonna do is take this bike out for a spin and see how she rides. I wanted to hate this bike. I really did. It's not a cool bike at all. It doesn't make a lot of power. And it doesn't have like a 19-inch front wheel or a 21-inch front wheel. The motor is uninspiring, but yet I like this bike. This is a fantastic bike. This little Versys, this is the 650 ABS 2015. It feels a whole lot like a Supermoto. It's got 17-inch wheels, goes around corners better than I expected it to, and you can get these very inexpensive in the used marketplace. This is also a very simple bike, not a lot of plastic, which I really like. You know, the ST1300, tons of plastic. It's a nightmare to do anything to. And the position of this reminds me, of course, of the V-Strom, but this one is actually a lot better cornering than the V-Strom. When you start accelerating, the revs are actually pretty nice. Look at that. The front wheel doesn't really come up, but it does become light enough to give you a little bit of a giggle. But this is what it really loves. It's like going around these little bit of a corners. It's a very versatile bike. It even has saddlebags and a top case, and it moves really quickly. You can feel the front skimming the tarmac. Very easy to ride. I think the big negative about this particular bike is the transmission is so rough. It reminds me of a bad transmission of a Ninja 250. It's actually worse than a transmission of a Ninja 250, if you can believe it. But the feeling of just throwing this bike around corners is insane because it's so good at it. It's so easy to throw around corners. Yeah, it's incredibly easy to throw around corners. It's probably one of the easiest bikes I've ever ridden. The ease of riding this thing is incredible. It's even easier than riding a ADV bike. The engine at idle sounds really terrible though. And when you compare it to Suzuki's V-Strom, yeah, the V-Strom is a whole lot better when it comes to sound. And a lot of people ride with their ears. This might be the best Kawasaki you can get. I'm like thinking about which Kawasaki you can get that's really good. You know, the KLR 650, that's an overpriced slowpoke. This one, you can get these things for about $3,000 for the older gen. This one might be $3,500. This one has been a little bit rashed out. It's got some broken stuff, so it's probably a little cheaper. But I have checked out different Versys online, and you're talking about hey buddy, you're talking about $3,500 for a Versys. Like, these little things just do not hold their value. And I think it's because this bike is seen as a beginner's bike. And a lot of people, they find it offensive to ride a beginner's bike these days. But it used to be that the Honda Rebel was a beginner bike, and then now you have the Versys, and then you have the Ninja 650R. I think the handling is really what surprises me. And by the way, this bike is also very efficient. And that's the thing too, going into corners, you don't have to worry about grabbing handful of throttle because this bike doesn't make that much power. So it's not like you're going like always like super fast, but you can push it. Like this bike is surprising me quite a bit. You know, when you've been pushing around an ST 1300 and then you hop on this, you go like, oh, so this is what a good light motorcycle feels like. It's got the 17-inch wheels. It's got a great position for the rider. It's got great wind protection. This is a aftermarket windscreen. The exhaust, it's great, high in the RPMs. So a lot of times you do not have to call the attention of police. It's the type of bike that is going to fool a lot of people. You get on this bike and you're like, oh yeah, it feels good. I know that all my buddies make fun of it, but damn, this thing is so good to ride. So easy to ride. Isn't that the whole point? And if you're asking about top speed, I don't know. This bike is not really a top speed thing. Officially impressed with the Kawasaki Versys 650. You know, these 650s there have gotten so freaking good. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye! And like I said before, like it feels like a little supermoto. But it doesn't feel very torquey. It does not feel like it's got a lot of torque. The V-Strom felt like it had a little bit more torque. And for me, I like the idea of having a 19-inch front wheel because, well, you know, even though I don't really ride off-road, it's like, oh yeah, one of these days I'll ride off-road. So that's the beauty. But a lot of people are much better off getting these 17-inch wheel bikes because they turn in much faster. Same thing with the Triumph Tiger 1050. That bike on paper doesn't seem like that good, but it's really the Tiger that people should be going after. But it's like marketing. You sell the sizzle, not the steak. And that is the Kawasaki Versys in a nutshell. This bike, I think I would consider one of my favorite bikes. It doesn't have too much power. It's got the 17-inch wheel, so it's mostly just a street bike with some off-roading style looks. And you can get this bike for a bargain. This particular one, maybe $3,500 to $4,000. You can get this and commute on it, tour on it, even do some light off-roading on gravel roads. This bike can pretty much do it all. It comes with saddlebags. It's a really good bargain by Kawasaki. I kind of wish that the KLR 650 used this engine and setup. It would be much better for a lot of riders. So the only thing that this thing is missing, I believe, is the 19-inch front wheel. Kawasaki should really make the Versys 650 with an optional 19-inch front wheel. But that's my thoughts on the Kawasaki Versys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.